Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us here today for this presentation at the end of the year for CleanTeQ Water, which successfully listed earlier this year. And the CEO, Mr. Willem Vriesendorp, who is speaking to us from the Netherlands today, will take us through this presentation, giving us, I think, a summary of the year that's been achieved and an outlook for the year ahead. So I'll hand it over to Willem.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, indeed. So I would like to do this short recap, really of the last 6 months since we separated and became an independent listed company, with some updates that happened over the last few months, and then also looking forward to the next year. Just because there might be some people logging on for the first time, we are a water treatment company, very much built around innovative technologies. In July 2021, we demerged from Sunrise, and we as a company have successfully implemented a number of large-scale systems around the world based on our proprietary technology, and we're therefore very much in an early stage looking to continue to grow and accelerate our growth. And we've seen that in this year, for example, with 4 new contracts. That was more than the contracts we signed in the 4 years before that. We're also developing a number of new technologies that took sort of a longer R&D period, as very much including our graphene membranes that I will be discussing a bit more in the next few slides. So this is our business. It's probably helpful to start talking about it a bit more and looking at it a bit more in terms of these 4 business units. It's very much so far, and our company is still very focused around our water technology solutions. Most of our people are there, our revenues are coming from that unit, and all other units are somewhat related to our water technology solutions, but they're still distinct. And we expect substantial developments to happen in those other areas as well. So it's good to look at our company probably in this way going forward. So our water technology solutions are really built around proprietary technologies. You see these logos on the bottom, those are 7 of those that are mostly strongly supported by various patents, and they all tackle a certain substantial issue we see in the water market today with a technology or solution that we believe is superior to the rest. We've recently, for some of those who have seen that, launched our phosphate solution. That's a phosphate recovery solution, so you turn it back into fertilizer. That's both then to address the pollution from phosphate, which is a global problem, but also very much the recycling of phosphate, because phosphate is seen as one of those rare, commodities that are facing potential shortages. So you don't want to really put it into the river, but you want to reuse it. And that's regulation coming online in various countries in Europe, and we expect other countries to follow. And what we did here is develop a solution that's much more economic than what's out there today, which then allows many more people to apply that. So that was a short sidestep, but this is our water technology solutions business. And then if you go down, another business that's gaining in importance and will continue to gain in importance over the next few years if we continue to hit the milestones, that's our own membrane platform. So it's a graphene membrane that has a number of very substantial benefits over other membranes, most prominently much lower energy cost, but also much less fouling. And I will talk about it in a bit more detail later, but this is really, we've seen some substantial developments here in the last few months, and we expect, therefore, the next year to see a lot of development in that area. And then on the right side, we have our metal recovery. The technology in this business, you could say, is very similar to what we do in water technology, but instead of taking out, selectively taking out certain pollutants, we recover valuable metals, such as copper or vanadium, and many others. So that's really, since we're also quite focused in there on waste streams, including tailings, you can then really create a very green way to recover those very valuable metals, which I think is also gaining in importance and interest around the world. We're working on a number of pilots. Some of you might have seen the cooperation we have with Enviro Copper to apply it to their project, but there are other projects also. So we're really looking for the next year to have our first large-scale projects in metal recovery. And also in this, our business model is slightly different from our water technology solutions in that for projects where we do metal recovery, we're also looking at some revenue upside, which could be revenue sharing, it could also be equity or some other way, so that we benefit from the benefits we bring to the customer by allowing economic extraction of these valuable metals. And then finally, our encapsulated bacteria, probably most familiar to people following the company closely because we're selling them now as part of our solutions. But we're certainly aiming to also sell them separately as a consumable. It is a consumable just as graphite membranes are. And therefore, they're relatively easy to standardize and scale. So what we expect and plan to do in the future is not only sell them into our own systems, but sell them directly to wastewater treatment plants and other wastewater solution providers so that they can be incorporated in those other solutions. And that helps then us to grow revenues much more rapidly. Another just general picture of the business, which I think always gives a good context. It's really been only in 2016, 17, when we were quite small in what we did in water, and we were sitting on a number of patents. And at that point, we really reoriented our patent portfolio to very specific solutions, the solutions you saw on the previous page, and a few high growth sectors where those solutions would have specific application. And on the back of that reorientation, we signed our first large-scale contracts that we've since delivered. And on the back of those contracts, we've seen accelerating signing of new contracts. So that's good. That's good news, obviously. It's also, I think, shows the dynamic we're in that you need your demonstrations out there to have follow-up sales. And I think that's relevant for the coming year. We are delivering, for example, our first Bionex project in China, our first project in the Middle East in the oil and gas sector. And some of the sales and some of the discussions we're having are very much looking at these projects to be delivered, so customers can look at it. And then we expect a substantial follow-up sales following the commissioning of those projects. And that's then further accelerated and supported by partnerships. So there's two partnerships agreements we signed over the last 6 months. One is with Nesser, an oil field services company that has a very strong focus on growing their environmental services business, in which water treatment is obviously a very prominent part. And also our solutions are actually quite energy efficient, so they can also help the end user then to reduce their carbon footprint. So Nesser has prioritized this because end users are starting to prioritize this very, very strongly. The big oil companies really want to reduce their footprint, both in water and in energy. A second partner we recently signed an agreement with is MCC, or actually MCC Environment, which is a subsidiary of MCC, which itself is a subsidiary of Minmetals. So these are very, very big companies. In China, we did a successful test with MCC on one of their plants. We're now actually moving into design, but we're still negotiating the contract for that plant. But we have already agreed to cooperate across the steel sector in China to, again, for us to accelerate sales and obviously for them to have a solution for some of their customers. Then pneumatic membranes, I mentioned that before, just again, a recap perhaps on the left. This membrane is new developed internally. It took at least 5-6 years for us to develop that. It's a big market, a couple of $1 billion market a year. One of the big applications is micropollutants there. And the first product we are launching into the market will be a Nano Filter, which then reduces energy cost very substantially. Big benefit here is, again, this is a consumable. So you can standardize it in these modules that you see on the top, and then you can sell it through multiple channels and achieve a certain acceleration there by not having to sell everything yourself, right? So you work with partners on that. This is a bit more detail on that. So it's really an inflection point we're at. You see here today, which is that we're now doing what we call pre-commercial production. So we produce proper membranes and proper cartridges that we test. Those tests have been very positive. So right now we're looking to do our first large batch to produce our own inventory that we can then use for certification, which you see below, and also our pilot demos. And that's really the final major milestone we need to hit to then become commercial and start commercial sales. And that's the milestone after we've finalize these production runs and the certification and the testing. That's the milestone we're looking to meet in 2022. And then pneumatic will become revenue generating as well in our portfolio. And as I said, its growth can be substantial. It always takes more time to get it going when you have a standardized product like a new membrane. But then certainly once you're introduced to the market, growth can be much quicker. That brings me to the outlook. I've mentioned most of these things before, so we're finalizing our large projects under implementation, and that includes our first project in oil and gas and our first project in bionics in China. We're expecting increasing sales revenues to new contracts. We really at an early stage of our growth, so we expect substantial growth to happen over the next few years. One thing to mention, I forgot to mention earlier, is the Townsville contract. Some of you might have seen that as well. That's a big contract, a tender we had won almost 3 years ago now. We did detailed design there, and we did many tests. And because of the time that elapsed, and because the scope changed, the scope has increased substantially, that project had to go out for a tender again. And that project is now the tender is now in progress. We're still waiting for the final specification, but in the next 2 months or so, that tender should be happening. And given our experience in this project and our understanding and our extensive testing we've done, and also very much because our solution fits the situation very, very well with a very sensitive environment there with the Great Barrier Reef, so a huge need to reduce pollutants to very low levels and to minimize brine, we think we're very well positioned again to win this tender, but that's going to play itself out over the next 2 months. So to go back to this list, so we're looking to increase our sales continuously over the next few years. On the back of that, we expect to see an expansion of our sales in consumables and components and maintenance that tends to follow a larger installed base of projects. Then pneumatic, I mentioned in some detail before, that's an important development for the next year. And finally, what I mentioned at the start, the metal recovery projects, where, as mentioned, we're talking to various customers, we're doing testing. So we're looking for 2022 to have our first large-scale application there. That really concludes the discussion. This is again just to show many of the things that have happened over the last 6 months, by no means all of them. And that concludes my presentation. I will take questions now, of course. And Peter, why don't you, if there are any questions?
Thanks, Willem. There are always questions, and we have a good, strong audience dialed in today. So thanks, everybody. This slide is good because it shows, I think, in what has been one of the most trying periods globally we've seen in decades, if not 100 years, that the company has really had a pretty auspicious year of achievement behind it, coming out of Sunrise on to the ASX individually. How have you found operating the company and moving forward over this difficult year?
And so I think the separation, so the fact that we were operating separately, that was a relatively smooth change because we were operating quite separately already. And also, I think the preparation, also the support from Sunrise we got during that transition was very substantial. And I think that all helped to make that transition very, very smooth. The last year was obviously difficult for other reasons, I would say, because of COVID. That certainly didn't help. It's not sort of a fundamental barrier to progress, but it's certainly not helping to accelerate things. Especially, I would say, our international expansion is harder when travel is so hard.
So, Willem, getting boots on the ground in some of your target geographical locations, you think we'll see an acceleration of your opportunities?
Yes, that's correct. Very much so. So as I mentioned, it's China, although we have boots on the ground in our own office. But this first large-scale project is very important there. I mentioned the Middle East. We're looking at Europe and the US. And if it wasn't for COVID, I would certainly have expected substantially more progress over the last 6 months already, because we have been discussing various projects and various partnerships there. But to actually get those things over the line, it is hard to do when you cannot travel, when it's hard to do demonstrations at site.
So following on from that, given perhaps there must therefore be a pent-up demand for solutions that haven't been able to be addressed during this last year or two. So when things are more open, you feel there'll be more opportunities on the table?
Yes, I definitely think so.
Now, and in that respect then, the broader market, how do you see it at the moment for companies such as yourselves? Is it very fragmented? Are there many global players dominating the water treatment and solutions sector?
It is very fragmented. The water sector is very fragmented, full stop. Even the large companies are not that large if you compare it to the total market. Where I expect the dynamic to go, I do think you see a lot of innovation coming into the market. There's new membranes, there's other new things. So we're very much in that direction. And I do think you see companies like ourselves to be able to gain market share at the expense of the bigger companies that provide the more standard solutions. I do think the portfolio approach we're having is very, very important for that. So we really try to avoid being a one-trick pony, so to say, because that can leave you quite exposed to market conditions or sudden competitors coming in. And I think customers and markets very much appreciate it that you have a wider suite of special solutions. So the nitrate development we just discussed, sorry, the phosphix or the phosphate recovery solution, that's a great example of that problem, right? So nutrients are a problem. And we think nitrate is the biggest problem, but phosphate is certainly a good second. So for us to have that portfolio solution to customers and really react to their needs, I think sets us up very well to not just grow for the next few years, but keep growing into a very substantial company based on the wide set of solutions we are building at the moment.
And one of the interesting solutions would be in the area of metals recovery, given the acceleration in awareness of ESG and sustainability in mining. There would be tailings dams and tailings stockpiles all around the world sitting there as potential targets for the right metals recovery treatment.
Yes, indeed. So that's why we're very excited about that field. It is a real process you have to go through. I think there's always regulation around it. There's always testing you want to do. And so that's why we're preparing the testing. And then you have the negotiation and discussion with the end user. But it's certainly a field that has enormous potential. And it obviously has the attractive feature that a single project, especially if you can expand it going forward, can have very, very substantial value. So it's not so much that we're looking at 5 or 10 projects necessarily. We're looking at a few very good ones that then create a lot of upside in terms of the ongoing revenues you can get from that.
And just on the portfolio, pneumatic graphene membrane, that's probably one of the more strong technologies you have in the portfolio. Can you expand a little bit more about where you see that growing and the sorts of opportunities and revenue streams that you can see coming from pneumatic?
Yes, it is indeed. It is one of our strongest development. It's also, it's almost a platform development, right? A new type of membrane where you use graphene instead of other materials. And we start with nanofiltration, and nanofiltration itself already has wide applications, but we also expect with those nanofilters to enter or compete in the market for RO, reverse osmosis, which is a very large market. So you see the whole membrane market, which is very prominent, has been prominent, that becomes your playground, so to say, with those membranes. And then application areas are varied as they are for membranes. So one is organics in wastewater as a prominent one for municipal and industrial, where small areas or small amounts of these organics really need to be taken out because of new regulation or anyway need to be taken out. The second area is with those nanofiltration is the problem of brines. I've mentioned that a lot over the last 6 months. The problem of brines is very, very large. And with nanofiltration, you can be much more selective. So you don't create these huge brine volumes that then create massive headaches and environmental hazard. So it's in itself a market that we are indeed excited about and a business we're excited about. We're running it a bit separate from the rest of the business. So it's really its own growth business. And as I mentioned, we're looking at these demonstration sites for the next year, and that should be the starting sign for us then to become commercial and start selling those membranes.
Well, it's been a great year of achievement, and we've noticed that the shareholders that have remained with the company have been pretty staunch. It's been a pretty solid register, and I think we're looking now for some more institutional growth on that register. Looking forward to the year ahead, Willem, what can shareholders look forward to coming on the back of what has been a pretty solid start to the listed life of CleanTeQ?
Yeah, I sort of tried to summarize it in the last slide. We're looking forward to more growth, more new projects, looking forward to delivering on our current project. I cannot emphasize that enough. These are new large-scale projects in different, in new applications, most of them. So we want to make sure that the customer is happy, and it provides a very, very good demonstration and starting point to then expand in those sectors and with those customers. So project delivery is always a very important one. New sales is a very important one. The developments in the medic I mentioned is an important one. International expansion will continue to be a prominent area of the growth of our business. And then, as I said, we hope metal recovery and also BOOT. It's two examples of sort of new areas, but they're a little bit more binary. So for metal recovery, some of the developments we're working on, we're very, very optimistic about, but we have to see those things to become a large-scale project. And for BOOT, that's this expansion of our business model where we provide plants as a investment where we get ongoing revenues. That's also a little bit more binary. We're interested in it. You need to find a customer that is credit worthy, that is interested in it as well. And then we hope to expand in that area as well.
Right. I think we've covered a question just here, Willem, we may have covered. What is your strategy regarding tightening your patent portfolio? I think you mentioned that a broader portfolio was one of the strengths.
Yes, I mean, one strategy which I think you can already see is continuing applying for new patents. So I forgot the number, but in the last year we've applied, I think, for 4 or 5 patents. That's the most prominent part of that strategy. And that's anyway, I think, very important. So you keep improving, you keep providing better solutions because the rest of the world is not standing still either. That's really what it is. We review it regularly. And then you just have to also do a better job in the market, right? It's not only patents, it's also delivering better than anybody else.
Execution, so that when we think of water and clean water, we think of CleanTeQ water, I think is what we want to see more of. Well, I'd like to thank you, Willem, for dropping in here today and giving that summary of the year and an outlook for the year ahead. I'd like to thank all shareholders and investors who have tuned in today. Thank you for your time. If you have some more questions, please email them in. Willem is always happy to answer them. And I hope everybody has a safe run up to the Christmas period. And we look forward to hearing from you next year again, Willem.
Yes, indeed. I mean, for me too, thanks everybody for your support over the last year, and looking forward to the next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.